We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they're controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releases.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobsta, the father of disinformation. And it is Friday, baby. You know what that means. It is the continuation of our Book of Revelation series, episode number 19. Back again with Ed Mabrie. Ed,
episode 16. It's episode 16. It's fine.
Is it 16? Is it 19?
Revelation 19.
Is it 19? I don't know what. It doesn't matter. All right, we're back.
We're enough episodes into this series to confirm that David cannot read Roman numerals. That's how
I thought
far
we
we've
confirmed
gone.
it before the show. I didn't realize we were confirming what chapter we were on, not what episode we were on. I looked at it. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's 16, but I don't know. I'm gonna take his word for it.
You know, it's actually partially my fault because you said 16. I thought you meant chapter 16, and I said, no, we're on chapter 19. But yeah, so
Unbelievable. It's all right. It's my fault. I should just know how to read Roman numerals by now. You think that I would after 19 episodes? I don't know. Ed, welcome back once again. We just had you on yesterday, but it's a new day, so please let the people know where they can find your work.
sure. So the best place, as always, is faithbyreason.net. Tons of hours and hours of study material there. My blogs, podcasts, videos there, and also my YouTube channel at Faith by Reason, like 883, I think. But you can just, if you search for it, you'll find it there. But if you go to faithbyreason.net, you'll see the videos there as well. I've started doing some short videos, like 1 minute reels on YouTube. I started doing those this week. I'll put up another one today. So, and with those, I'm just going over like some of the basics of Christian philosophy and just doing those in 1 minute formats. I'll probably, cut up some of my other stuff and put some pertinent things there and just keeping the content going.
That's a great move because we're in this time where, the move I mean is those small digestible things because it's great to do these deep dives, but in these tumultuous times, people are coming to God with a lot of questions, right. And so it's good to have that kind of preliminary stuff to something that's digestible for people who are just coming to the table and asking some questions. So great move, I think, Ed.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to keep those going. I have to keep myself disciplined to get one out every weekday. I'm taking the weekends off, but I'm trying to get them out 5 days a week.
Wow, that's you know what, man. I really do think that the tenacity and just continuing to push and push. I think that really does grow a channel, and it's what makes people successful in general in whatever they're doing. So I'm hoping that it works for us. And I'm when I see people like you doing, I'm pretty sure I'm like it's going to work for him. So I'm like, all right, I might be good too, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, actually, I mean, so far, like the few, I think I put out 3, and they're like actually getting a good chunk of views. So I'm happy about that. I think because again, it's just they're short, easy to digest, and people don't have to take a half an hour to an hour to sit through something.
It's also that kind of the way that content is digested now. It's great that podcasts are being successful. It's like we're talking for 2 hours with people, and it's great that is successful. But there's still that element where TikTok has seemingly reduced the people's attention span to something that is like a minute or a minute and 30 seconds. So you got to kind of hit all those fields. But I do think that is going to be the way to success. So Ed, if you could just remind the people where we've been, and let's lay the foundation for where we're going today.
Sure. So where we've been is we are at the end of the tribulation. The 7 years are up, and we are going to talk about the so-called Battle of Armageddon. And before I do that, though, I want to address a few questions that I've been getting, because I appreciate everyone sending the questions to me and the comments and things like that. But some of them have been pretty common, and I want to just go into a few of those so I can just kind of take care of them in a batch format.
Take it away.
the first thing is that this week the last 2 weeks have like been really crazy in the prophecy world, because everyone's been talking about the Feast of Trumpets, and would that be the time when the rapture would happen? And so I started looking into it, and of course that's changed my algorithm, and I've just been flooded with tons and tons of people saying, it's going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets. They give all these different reasons, these signs in the heavens, and these different constellations arranged, and everyone's having these dreams. And like this, I guess this little asteroid that's circling the Earth now will be in our orbit for about another month, and they consider that a second moon. And there's like a bunch of people who've said they've had these 2 moon dreams, and so it is nuts. And the question I got was, what do you think about the rapture happening on October 3rd, on October 2nd? And my response was, I'll give you my response on October 3rd. Because here's the thing with all the date setting stuff. I think it's honestly a fool's errand. Not because I think that people are insincere. I think that people they're doing their best. But if you look at it, there's a 100% failure rate. I talked about this in my Messiah 2030 video. Everyone who's ever predicted a date in the past for the rapture or the second coming, they've all been wrong. Now, that doesn't mean that the next person who does it is going to be wrong. Maybe you have the secret sauce and God really told you this. But I think I don't think we're called to do that. There are very few places in the Bible where we're given like exact dates. The 70-week prophecy is one of the prime areas where we are. We're told that from the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, it'll be 483 years exactly until Mashiach Nagid, the Messiah, the King. And that happens at the triumphal entry. And then we're told that once the Antichrist confirms a covenant with the many, it'll be exactly 7 years. So we are told to count down there, but it doesn't say that's the same thing about the rapture or anything like that. So here's been obviously October 2nd is come and gone, and we're still here. It hasn't happened. And I guess we technically have until today for the Feast of Trumpets. And hey, if I go poof during this episode, then we'll know that somebody was right.
Right.
But here's my main thing about
or could that just mean that we don't have Down syndrome? Didn't we establish that already? That could be it.
It could be that as well. But the bottom line is we need to use discernment, because we hear so many crazy things. Like I just wrote a few of them down that I was looking at. Someone says that that there's this eclipse that's happening right now, that they said, oh, so this is a sign. It's the Ring of Fire eclipse, and a ring is like a wedding ring, so that's Jesus coming to take back his bride. Well, the wedding ring actually has a pagan origin. It's not Jewish. It's not from God. The whole having the wedding, and I know we all have one. I have one too. but it doesn't have a biblical origin. It actually comes from a pagan tradition of like basically infinity. That's what the circle of it, and that's where wedding ring comes from. So I don't believe that God is going to use something that has a pagan origin to signify him coming for his bride. And then there's also someone said that that the rapture verse says that Jesus will come at the voice of an archangel, shout from heaven, and the last trump. Oh, last trump. Well, that means that Trump's going to win, and that's when the rapture is going to happen. Folks, come on. That's not. First of all, trumpet is an English word. Has nothing to do with Donald or anything like that. But this is what people do, and if you don't have discernment, it sounds weird. On the last one, there's we already went over this in Revelation chapter 6, where it says that the stars will fall from the heavens. And they said, and this one lady was saying, well, stars we call celebrity stars, and all the stars are falling now. You have Puff Daddy going down, so now the stars are falling. So this is a sign that this rapture's coming. No, are you?
Can I tell you though? I resonate or empathize with these people because I recognize that they're grasping at straws.
Yeah.
Only because this is the same way that I grasp at straws. As a longtime schizo conspiracy theorist, this is the foundation of how I got going. I think I'm better now, but for the first half of I've been one for 18 years. So for 9 years, I was just grasping at everything, interpreting everything as, could this possibly be a sign of the end times? So I get it.
That second one reminds me of that the guy the one that does all the prophecy, Kim. I think he died. He's an Australian prophet, and he was talking about the trumpet sounding, the trump, and he was doing all this Trump stuff. And like just on stage speaking in tongues, and people, I was like, man, I don't know, maybe
But
let me look
to
into that.
Ed's
But
point, right? It's like it is kind of a fool's errand. I'm not saying just because I wasn't able to predict it that somebody else won't. It's like I'm certainly not the authority on intellect and being able to decode things, but I made that mistake for a long time. I tried to say this was going to happen and that was going to happen because I was so afraid with the new information that I was getting that I thought for sure some of these Kim Clementi, thank you, Q.
Oh yeah, I know that. Oh yeah, I've heard of that person. I'll say I know him. I heard things about him, but I didn't really follow him because I heard he was kind of off. So,
But
Yep.
I do see people still doing that thing that I used to do. And I'm not saying that I'm so smart. If I couldn't get it right, you're not going to get it right. I'm just saying I do see you guys kind of doing the same thing I do. And I agree with Ed. It is a bit of a fool's errand to try to
right. I
predict
mean, I
change
understand
at
people
times.
I understand people are excited about it and they want it to be. So do I. I mean, that would have been great if it happened this week.
Right.
I'd love nothing more than that. But we have to use our heads, use some, be intelligent about it. Understand that the Bible wasn't written in English. Okay, so we can't use our English vernacular and kind of superimpose that on the Bible. And the last thing I'll say is this: and I talked about this in the Messiah 2030 video. If you just feel called to set a date, fine, but do this. If the date comes and goes and nothing happens, at least have the integrity to go back to your channel and say, you know what, I was wrong. They don't do that. They'll either they take the video down. And I looked this morning, a ton of them have been taken down, or they lock their comments. But I will give credit to one person there. I think it was their name is on YouTube. It's like Ghost 619 or something like that. He actually came on because he was adamant it was happening on a second. He came back and said, you know what, I was wrong. I apologize. Maybe I got my math wrong. I wasn't trying to deceive you. And I read the comments and people were cool with it. They said, hey man, we get it. We were excited just like you. Too bad it didn't happen, but we don't blame you because he was honest about it. And at least he owned up. But most people just lock their comments or just take their video down and are not held accountable.
I've talked about it before. Back in New Jersey, where I used to live, there was a guy. I forget what year it was. His name was Harold Camping, and he had a bunch of. He took out billboard space. He was doing the running the gambit, letting everybody know that he had a numerical code that he had deciphered that allowed him to know the exact time and date of whatever it was, either the rapture or the tribulation and that date it came and passed, and Harold Camping was simply never heard from again. And I do think he died shortly after that. But
He did.
there was no issued apology. There was no talking to the people that he, number one, filled with fear, and number two, unfortunately misled, whether intentional or otherwise. And he just never put that to bed. He never took accountability for.
Yeah, he was local to us. He was because I'm in Northern California. He had billboards up in Oakland, and what he did was the first date passed and nothing happened. Then he said, "Oh no, I just got my math wrong. Here's a new date," and that like a year later, and that passed, nothing happened, and then he just disappeared.
Yep.
Another one, or they'll move the goalposts and say, like a good example of this is very popular guy, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. He wrote the Harbinger books, and he kind of made and the Shemitahs and the blood moons and all that. And it's like 2015 comes and goes, nothing happens, and I never heard him come out and say, hey, you know what, my bad. He just said, oh well, I didn't say it was definitely happening. I said it might happen. Like, no, dude.
He said he wrote books.
You wrote books, and you made
Yeah.
a ton of money off this.
So there, dude, is that like that's when God just like does something funny? Like he's like, yeah, this guy's name it's gonna be Khan. That's gonna be his name. His name's gonna be Khan.
Exactly.
And what is he gonna do? I don't know. Let's wait and see. I think he's gonna con people though.
So a couple more questions before we get into the Armageddon scenario. I've gotten a lot of people asking me like, what is the best Bible to use? Because there's so many translations and so many versions. And so two answers. One is I think you should use something that comes from the Masoretic text or the Textus Receptus, such as like I've heard that the American Standard Bible is a really good one. Any of the King James derivatives. I would stay away from paraphrases like the Common English version or the worst of all, the Message, which is terrible.
Is that one where they say a thing to you and then they're like, now here's what that means?
No. The Message just takes the old King James English and just puts it into modern English, and so so now you're like 3 levels beyond the original language, and so you're going to miss a ton in those. And one like in the Message, it says like the Apostle Peter, whose name Peter or Petros means rock in Greek, and he just calls him Rocky. He has Jesus calling Peter Rocky because that's his nickname. Yeah.
So this guy took
but the most
creative
important
interpretation to say that his name was just it's a nickname. It's called Rocky.
Well, granted, Peter was a nickname. His name was Simon or Simeon, and and Jesus gave him the name Petros, the rock. But we're taking that and say, well, in English we called him Rocky. I'm like, okay, that's just an example, but he does that a lot, and you miss a whole lot of information there. But the most important thing I would say is get some type of interlinear resource like Blue Letter Bible. And by interlinear, it means that it takes every single word that's in English and it gives you the original language version. So you can click on a button and you will see the original language, and you can look up what each one of those words mean. I think that's the most important thing when you're studying, is to understand the original meaning of those words and what the Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic actually is.
That's a game changer for sure.
Yeah. And the last question I'll get to now is, again, this is back to the whole rapture thing. People talk about, no one knows the day or the hour, so that's why we shouldn't set dates. Yes and no. I don't think we should set dates. Definitely, because of the reasons we already gave. But that verse, no man knows the day or the hour, that's from Matthew 24. Jesus is not talking about the rapture in Matthew 24. Matthew 24, Jesus answering two questions from his disciples. Question number one was, when will the temple be destroyed? And question number two is, when will your second coming happen? And Jesus is speaking about his second coming when he says no one knows the day or the hour. He's not talking about the rapture of the church. The church didn't exist yet, and the disciples didn't ask him about the church. So when he says no one knows the day or the hour, he is specifically talking about his second coming. So you can't apply that to the rapture. That doesn't mean that you can set a date for it. I just want to make it clear that you can't use that to justify not setting a date. Now, there's reason to believe that it could happen during the Feast of Trumpets. But doesn't mean it's happening in the Feast of Trumpets this year or next year, who knows when. So that's just it. Those are the questions I want to get to. I want to hit up, and then we can go to the Armageddon scenario.
All right, and just so people are aware, we were talking before the show, and I don't want to give too much away, but you are working on an idea of how to answer, because you get a tremendous amount of questions, whether it's from your work on Faith by Reason or your appearances on this show, and so I just like to make people aware that Ed is making an effort to kind of create a platform from which he can answer specifically to answer people's biblical questions. So I think that'll be a great tool if that should come to pass. And
I think it will. I mean, we're myself and who I was on with yesterday. You guys, I think you said you're going to put that episode out today or tomorrow or something.
Yeah. So people saw it. It was John Lenhart, and it was a great episode, a great conversation. But that is who you're considering working with, correct?
Yeah. He and I, we really want to do it because we just think it'll be a help to folks. There's so many questions going around right now because I think people really know that we're in some crazy times, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so I think that, and again, we're working on the format, but if you guys have questions, send them to me, send them to Nephilim Death Squad guys, and we will try to just give you answers to those questions and give you the research and take a step back and look at it. My friend John, he's a big picture guy. I'm more of a small picture details guy. So between the two of us, I think we have enough knowledge to help people. And that's really what it's all about. It's just really helping people understand what they believe and why
this could be an easy show. I get schizo questions every day. And now that we're saying it again, I'm like, oh, I could just read him these DMs. Like, they're asking me crazy stuff, and I'm like, I don't know how to answer you.
And it's great, too, because I think oftentimes asking questions is one of the most effective ways to learn. Instead of just sitting there and being lectured to actually get involved. And so that's going to be something that's great for me as well. So let's get into the meat of today's episode then.
Right, let's get it. So as I said at the very beginning, where we are in the scenario, we're at the end of the tribulation. So you've had the bowls of wrath have been poured out. So backing up a little bit. So at the 3.5 year point is when you have the abomination of desolation. That's when the Antichrist, the beast, sets himself up in the temple to be worshipped. After he gets this head wound, he comes back, and I believe that he is inhabited by Nimrod. And there's another reason I'm going to give for that a little later on. Let me talk about what's happening in Armageddon. So that happens, and he comes back. I believe he's cloned. He comes back as a clone, and that's the image or the copy of the beast. Everyone is forced to worship it under penalty of death and take the mark. And when you take the mark, I believe it's going to change you physically to where you're no longer human and no longer eligible for salvation. And I think it might make you basically put you in a position to be inhabited by demons, or the disembodied spirit of Nephilim. And so that's why, and then at this point, everyone's chosen a side. either you are on the Antichrist side and you've changed yourself, you altered yourself, or you are one of the Jewish remnant and you're in hiding in Basra, which is modern day Jordan. We're going to talk about that today as well. Or you've become a believer and you're just on your own, and unfortunately you probably won't make it because you won't be able to buy or sell without the mark. So you're not going to get resources, and you'll have the death penalty. People are going to turn you in. We talked a little bit before about how back during the highlight of the COVID days, people would turn you in. Hey, he's not wearing his mask. He didn't get the shot. So it's going to be even worse than that. So then the bowls of wrath are poured out. There's God pouring out his judgment on spiritual evil. I want to say this again. God takes no pleasure in judging humanity. That's not his plan for humanity. His plan for humanity is to dwell with him. His plan for spiritual evil is to be judged. But if you've aligned yourself by your choice with spiritual evil, then you're going to absorb those same punishments. But that's your choice. So he pours them out, and then when he pours out the sixth bowl, is when, fifth or sixth bowl, sorry, off the top of my head, but then the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan, the dragon, send out spiritual messengers to gather people together to a place called Armageddon or Harmageddon, or actually Harmoed. We're going to get to what those words mean. So this is the big deal. Everyone knows, whether you're religious or secular, Armageddon. You know that it means some kind of cataclysmic, end of the road battle, devastation. So we're going to talk about that. So start with just a few before we can get to the actual verses. It's actually a pretty short set of verses in Revelation chapter 19. So before we get to those, I want to go over a few of the myths about it. The first myth is that Armageddon's the end of the world. It's not, because we're going to find out in a couple episodes from now, maybe a couple, 3 episodes, that after Armageddon is done, that's when the millennial kingdom happens. That's 1,000 years. So there will be another 1,000 years of life on this earth after Armageddon. So it's not the end of the world.
Is it better then to look at Armageddon as like a battle?
Yes and no. It's a conflict. It's not much of a battle as far as two armies going against each other, like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. It's not that kind of battle, but it's the final conflict where spiritual evil is defeated. The fallen Elohim are defeated, like basically once and for all. I mean, there's another rebellion at the end of the millennium that we'll talk about, but this is like the scenario where where basically I call Armageddon the end of the rule of evil on this world. Because you can say that basically that since original sin, the dominant rulership of this earth has been evil, be it evil men and or evil Elohim. That's going to be the end of it. And then the next kingdom will be the kingdom of Christ, which is, his perfect rule, and then it's eternity, and there will be no more evil. So it's not the end of the world. Another myth is that Armageddon is in the Valley of Megiddo. The Valley of Megiddo, or the Valley of Jezreel, is this area in northern Israel. It's a valley with a pretty wide flat floor of the valley, and mountains and hills on either side. Napoleon actually called it the best natural battlefield he's ever seen, because again, it's flat, so it's easy for the armies to come against each other, and because of the hills on each side, you can't escape. So if you're beating your enemy, they have no place to go. So you call it a great natural battlefield. And if you talk to most people, they will look at Armageddon as the Valley of Megiddo. Problem is, they aren't looking at the actual language. John says there you go. Yeah. So you have that natural battlefield out there, but Armageddon is Greek, but John says in Hebrew is Armageddon. It's Har Megiddo. Har in Hebrew means mountain. So, but it's not even the mountain of Megiddo, because Megiddo is still a Greek word. In Hebrew is Har Moed. Har Moed means the mountain of God. So Har Moed is not the valley of Jezreel. It's not the valley of Megiddo. Har Moed is the mountain of God. Where is that? The mountain of God is in Jerusalem. It's right outside of Jerusalem. It's Mount Moriah. It's where Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac. It's also probably quite likely it's Golgotha. It's where Jesus was crucified. Why is it called the mountain of God? Because it is the mountain of assembly. In the physical world, if you could see into the spiritual world, it's where God's throne is. It's where he where God is. If you can see into, I mean, physically it's just a hill, but spiritually it's where God's throne room is, because there are mountains throughout the Bible are often used to designate spiritual governments. For example, Mount Hermon or Mount Bashan in northern Israel. That's where the fallen Elohim came down at first in Genesis chapter 6 to procreate with women and make the Nephilim.
Ed, just to back you up for a second,
Yeah, go ahead.
you're saying that in a physical realm we wouldn't see anything, but that this location is potentially the location of God's throne room?
Yes.
It's interesting you use like that phrase, the throne room. This gets thrown around a lot.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, that was completely accidental. I'm retarded. But yeah, that gets used a lot when you're talking with people who are being recruited, and this is something that me and David have been, unfortunately, like
Obsessed
running
with.
into. Yeah.
Well, I mean, running into, but also obsessed with it. Because we won't bore you with the details of it too much, but there's this idea that there is a throne room of Baal, and that throne room is underground, which I find interesting because
Tunnels.
God's throne room would be in a high place on
Right.
this mountain, and that this entity, this fallen angel's throne room, would be underground, essentially in a cave system. And
Yeah.
that's actually something that comes up a lot. Many people have seen this, whether it's through dreams and visions. And I'm willing to at least speculate as to that throne room's location being somewhere in southern Indiana in a cave system.
Oh.
Yeah, and yes, where these things are happening, and you look at these underground maps, the cave systems. I think it's one of the largest in America, right?
It's literally, there's a conjunction of cave systems in North America, or at least in the United States. It's the largest cave system in the United States. It stretches into the Appalachians. It's absolutely massive, but it just so happens that all these people that are having these visions of this throne room and being essentially
Recruited.
offered a recruitment by Baal for a coming battle, they all happen to live in southern Indiana. So
Somebody we spoke with on this show. Yeah, it's all completely separate of each other. Very strange.
don't
Keeps
know
coming
each
up.
other whatsoever, no connection. But it just so happens that once we figured out where they all lived, we looked at the map of the cave systems in the United States. And let me tell you, there's none in northern Indiana, but in southern Indiana is where you suddenly tap into the largest cave system in the United States of America.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
Because I think we talked about this when we went over chapter 6, where when the sixth seal is open, there's this great earthquake that opens up all these underground areas. I think it opens up because it's basically kicking the fallen Elohim out from these bunkers. And I don't know. I've been hearing a lot of podcasts. There was why Tripoli had one maybe this week or last week. Everyone's talking about tunnels.
Yes.
And all these tunnels, underground bunkers.
What's really interesting about the guest that was on Tripoli's show is that he claims to have also been recruited, and the way he describes it. Now he says it was by Jesus Christ, but the way he describes it was like the same way that these other people did. So we're just listening to a guy that's independent of all these people that we're already aware of tell us the same thing. I think what's becoming very clear to us is that there's a recruitment process happening right now. And
Here's the crazy part, just to add some veracity to this, because I understand how people can come to Tony with similar stories, or even come to Sam with similar stories, because they're listening and they're hearing this lore. This guy came to me with this story before I had a podcast, before I started doing a show. I was doing Tower Gang, but that's just pure comedy. It's nonsense.
Right.
Before I did my other show, the Top Lobster show, or before I started this one, I was friends with this guy for about a year, and he had told me, confided in me, that all this stuff happened. Then we find out the location and so on and so forth, and here we are again. We're like, well, what do we do with this information? It's just.
But to your point, Ed, I suspect that even if you found, because the throne room is where a series of tunnels seemingly culminate in this area that it's a large room with high ceilings, and in the center of it there's a throne. I suspect that in the physical realm, if you actually found it, there would be a corresponding physical location for it, but I don't think you would see a throne. I don't think there would be anything in that
You
room.
wouldn't be able to perceive it, unless you you were in some kind of spiritual state. And there was also someone, actually, I think you brought him up. Well, I heard you bring him up, Raven, before I was even on the show. I think you guys were on Tripoli's show, and you're talking about this one guy, and I've seen his videos too. I think he's dead now, but he was involved in these deep underground bases, and I think he like lost a limb.
Yes. Let me not mess this up because I messed it up on Tinfoil Hat. This is Phil Schneider. Phil Schneider was a contractor for the U.S. government, and he was building deep underground military bases. And to make a long story short, his equipment keeps coming up broken and damaged, and so he's forced to take a elevator shaft deep underground to see why this is happening, and ends up coming across a skirmish, a battle of these entities underground, and he ends up getting gutted like a fish. Makes the rounds, does a lot of testimony. He's sharing his story. He's saved by a Green Beret. There he is. He's missing several fingers on one of his hands. He has an abdominal scar that runs the length of his his abdomen, and there are a series of attempts on his life after he started. And he's even saying they're going to kill me for sharing this, but he still continues to share it at one podium and another podium and another podium. And he has so many attempts on his life, shot at, ran off the road, that by the end of it, he's literally using a catheter. He's wheelchair bound, and in the end, seemingly commits suicide by strangling himself with his own catheter tube.
Check out his fingers.
That's likely. Wow.
You can see his hands in this image.
Yeah, I saw some of his videos. I don't know if they're still up, but I remember seeing them like a few years ago, and I thought it was fascinating.
Something is going around. Something's going on underground. And look, when it comes to where are the Nephilim? Well, in Kandahar, they were in a series of caves. Where are the mole people? They're underground.
Luddy's in a cave.
Yes, Luddy's in a cave. Where are the reptilians? Well, they're underground. Every single entity in the lore, it's all about these cave systems. And on a final note, before we discard,
where do UFOs go? They go into the ocean and they pull into their driveway. I don't know. Exactly.
But in the south of Indiana, there is also an expansive national forest, and that plugs right into the David Paulides Missing 411. Is that it is Missing 411, or am I making up a series of numbers at the end there? Missing 411 is that series, right, where people go missing in national forests, and David Paulides is trying to find. But they're seemingly all connected. But I don't want to. Of course we derailed it, and we just can't help it. But
so I think what's happening a lot is that a lot of the physical entities are underground, but I think. And maybe spiritual ones too. I think the spiritual ones generally are on mountains. I actually talk Mount Bashan. That is basically the enemy's stronghold. That's their council. That is one of their throne rooms. And a perfect example of that is when you get to Matthew chapter 17. Jesus goes when he's transfigured. He takes his disciples. He takes 3 of them, and he climbs to the top of Mount Bashan, Mount Hermon, which is the gates of hell. And he's transfigured. He basically calls them out and says, "Look, here I am. If you guys are so bad, come and get me." And nobody does anything because they're scared of him. So and that's when he says, "Okay, you guys aren't going to fight me. Great. I'm going to go finish my work and get crucified." But he and raised again and win.
It's pretty gangster, actually.
This is the Pergamon, right? So that's a hill as well.
That's where his throne. That's where Satan dwelt in Revelation chapter 2.
And this connects to the whole Tower of Babel thing too, where it's like it seems to be that in order to get to this spiritual realm, a high place at the very least is what's important.
They were making their own high place, and they were that's the whole point of Babel, was to make this high place their own tower so that they could transverse into the spiritual realm. And God specifically says if we don't stop them, they're going to succeed. So basically it said they were all of one mind. So they were all focused. All their spiritual energy as human beings were focused on this one thing, and because of that, he said they would have succeeded. So I got to confuse their languages, because otherwise they will be able to come into the spiritual realm. And I'm going to get to that. Thanks for setting that up as the seed that we're going to see when we look at the real purpose of Armageddon. So, and also, if you look in the Old Testament, whenever the Israelites were committing adultery, what would they do? They would make these idols on the high places, because that's where, again, these certain mountains are places where the veil between our two realms is thinner. And they would do their sacrifices and rituals up there to thin the veil, to allow the passage of spiritual energy from one realm to the next.
Interesting. Makes you think about the possibility of, if God is kind of worried about, like, hey, if they actually do this, they're going to be here. Like, what does that mean? There must be some kind of damage that they could actually do if they get a foothold into the spiritual realm of heaven. If they get back, they could probably break some stuff, you know?
I think they might be immortal if they could transverse the
Ooh,
spiritual realm.
interesting.
Because again, we are technically immortal, all of us, and that's good news or bad news depending on where you're going to spend your eternity. But once we are out of these physical bodies, the real you is spirit. I mean, if the real top lobster, the real raven, are your thoughts, your memories, your hopes, your dreams, all your things. That's who you really are. This flesh suit we're in is that's our avatar.
There is
And
precedence too, though, right? Of like physical bodies leaving this realm, like Enoch, being this righteous scribe, and sitting there at the side of God when the archangel Michael comes and petitions him to do something about the fallen and the Nephilim that are doing all these terrible things. He just turns to Enoch and calls him over. He's like, "Yo, righteous scribe, come here real quick." So like it seems that Enoch was so maybe if that has happened, maybe you can leave this realm in this physical body. Although I don't know why you'd want to keep this meat sack.
well, yeah, but I think that I don't know the mechanics behind it, but I don't think your human body can permanently be there. But your spirit can. Your spirit is eternal, and this is what I tell when I'm talking to atheists. I'm like, you know what? You're eternal whether you like it or not. When you die, you're not just going to go in a puff of smoke and disappear. You are eternal. So that's why the most important question is, where are you going to spend your eternity? You are going to be conscious forever. And you can either be conscious in the presence of God or outside of the presence of God. And we'll talk about that when we get to the great white throne judgment. But my point is that if they had transversed into the spiritual realm, they could have been immortal. They would have been in the heavens. And I don't know, God might have had to kick them out somehow, but he didn't even want to go through that. He said, let's just stop this, nip this in the bud. So there's that. So that's where they're going. They're going to Harmoed. And why? We'll get to that in just a sec. So that's the other one that is the valley. And the other one, another myth is that the Battle of Armageddon is again this epic fight between the armies of Satan and the armies of heaven. No, it's not. We're gonna see when we read the verse, Jesus speaks words and they all just go. It's gonna be like if you saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, that last scene where they open the ark and they like all just kind of melt away. I don't know if that's how it's gonna happen, but basically he speaks words and they die and then they're eaten by vultures.
So in other words, a battle is not a great way to put it.
No,
it's kind of one-sided.
Yeah, there will be a physical battle, but it won't be at Harmoed. There's another one because I'm going to get to, and that's the other myth is that Armageddon only happens in one place. It doesn't. It happens in Jerusalem at Harmoed, but it also happens in Basra or Jordan because Jesus is going to go there either before or after. There's some controversy as where he goes first, but we're going to talk about that when we get to the second coming. And the other myth is that what we kind of got to, let me back up. A different one is that this is Satan trying to wipe out the Jews. That's what Armageddon is. It's not that, because we see that when those spirits that look like frogs go out and gather the armies together, it says they're gathering them together to battle against Jesus.
Pause for a second. Yeah. Very interesting. Spirits that look like frogs. That was from the last couple of chapters ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's from 16, bro. Chapter 16. You're talking about the whole Keck thing.
This guy, did you hear the latest members episode of Merkel's show where he's talking to the guy who's recruited by Baal?
I did listen to it. Yeah. So what was?
One of the interesting things is the guy kind of like seems frustrated, and he's like, this sounds stupid. He said, but when this all started happening to me, I was in a forest, like just doing some stuff, and he says, and there was a freaking frog, and I don't know what that has to do with anything. And then all of a sudden, he's approached by a man that's dressed in like black leather.
Yeah, he followed a frog, and the frog
it was
all of a sudden disappeared, but it was a cat in its place, and then he followed the cat, and so the frog went around a tree. And when he followed around the tree, suddenly there was no more frog. But eventually, this happens to him enough times where when he goes around the tree, now there's a man there. That's interesting.
Well, I think we talked about this when we talked about the bowls of wrath, that these frog spirits are spirits of communication. We see them in Egypt. One of the plagues that God had against Egypt was flooding the land with frogs, and because of that demon or Elohim called Keck. When you have that's when you have Pepe the frog, and the people on the 4chan or 8chan, one of the chans, I don't know, would laugh saying Keck Keck Keck. Mm-hmm. So so that's actually a demonic entity that does communication. I think it's a version of Hermes, who
That
is
really puts a hole
Hermes
in
or
my-
Mercury, the one who communicates with speed.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So let's continue on.
Yeah. Okay. So this is he's not going to battle against Israel. It says specifically he's going to battle against Jesus. And why would he go to Jerusalem to battle against Jesus? Jesus isn't in Jerusalem. At this point, the Jews aren't in Jerusalem. The Jews, they were told 3.5 years ago that when you see the abomination of desolation, get out. You got to go. You got to roll. So they're the ones who've gone to Basra, modern day Jordan. They're hiding out there. So why would he be going to Jerusalem to battle the Jews? He's not. He's going to Jerusalem because that's where Har Moed is. He is going to invade heaven. This is where we get back to Nimrod. This is the purpose of Armageddon. The purpose of Armageddon isn't because they think they're going to be able to shoot at Jesus with missiles and guns. No, they're not that stupid. They're going to do exactly the same thing that Nimrod wanted to do before. This is one of the many reasons why I believe that the Antichrist is visited by Nimrod. Because what was Nimrod going to do? We just talked about it. He was building the Tower of Babel in order to invade heaven. Now he's saying, okay, you guys these plagues have happened. You've destroyed my kingdom. I'm going to go and fight you directly. I'm going to go do what I was trying to do before. I'm going to go to your holy mountain and I am going to invade. And now I have all the fallen Elohim with me. I've got my Nephilim with me. We're spirit beings. We are going to invade heaven.
I'll tell you what, if nothing, you can't say he's not tenacious. I mean, literally to die and then wait for Hillary Clinton to find your genetic resurrection chamber just so you could come back and do the same shit over again, and also be prophesized to fail. I mean, tenacious, maybe not wise.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, tenacious.
Well, keep in mind, I think we talked about this with John Linhart yesterday, but once you've been judged, you don't have a free will anymore.
Yes.
They're not able to think outside of the box. They are locked into their programming, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. And Nimrod is programmed to do two things: to rule over people and to get them to invade the spiritual realm.
Interesting.
So that's what Armageddon is really about.
NPCs.
Yeah,
Right?
pretty much. Yeah, this is like the final boss battle, I guess you could say, if we keep it in video game terms. So they're going to do that. They're like, look, you've destroyed the earth. All the waters are blood. The mountains and the trees and grass are burnt up. From the plagues. The mountains and islands are gone. Every city, it says, when the seventh bowl was poured out, all the cities are gone. I mean, if it's an earthquake strong enough to destroy mountains, yes, cities are done.
Yeah.
That probably means all these underground tunnels and bunkers we've been talking about, they're all gone. It's like, hey, screw you. You screwed up Earth. We're going to go to heaven.
That's
Jesus
wild
says,
too, because
"Not so
people
fast."
that are building these underground bunkers, these are people that are anticipating that there's going to be some sort of apocalyptic event,
Right.
And for some reason they are doing a thing that if you read, it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah, you want to go up.
You want to go up, yeah.
Yeah, like the guy who was on. I listened to a part of what was on with Tripoli and this NSA guy. That guy was weird. It was interesting stuff, but I mean, he seemed like
the guy that we were talking about.
Little background with that guy. He was supposed to be on this show talking about something else. Something came up, scheduling conflict. He was kind of nasty. So I was like,
yeah.
well, I was like,
Unfortunately,
you're just
2 times
out.
we had to reschedule with him, and he didn't take kindly to that. He wasn't necessarily nasty, but he was like, let's just say, a little abrasive. And I was like, all right, well, we'll
I'm like,
revisit
well, I don't
this
need
in
to
the
be
future.
spoken to like that. So I just
Yeah. So, but
something that was his last name, maybe.
yeah, and it's a weird thing because, like, what he's saying, I actually don't doubt what he's saying, but what really gets me is like, who is he? That's the thing that gets me. Oh, this is parallel scales. Thank you for the $10 donation. Said I struggle with Psalms 139's verse. I was fearfully and wonderfully made. Then I see the 2 of your faces and was given Ed Mabrie level of revelations.
thanks.
What you see on our face is very much like where it's like ignorance is bliss. That's what's happening.
Simple Jack.
Which is Simple Jack. Yeah.
But
Thank you.
continue your thought on Steven there, because there was
Yeah. I mean, again, I just listen. I think I listened to half of it this morning, so not like I did a deep analysis, but just listening to him, like you, Raven. I mean, I don't doubt some of this is true. The underground bases and the tunnels, it's just him. I'm not sure about him. He said a lot of stuff about himself that I wasn't like. He says, I can't be killed. I'm Jesus's warrior. I'm a psychic warrior. Jesus was around for 25 million years and things like that. I'm like,
Yeah, there's a
Let me
lot
tell you
there.
something. David texted me right away. He was like, "You have to listen to this." And this guy's probably listening to this and plotting our demise. Whatever. About an hour 15, Dave said, "Listen at about an hour 15." So I didn't listen to any of the stuff in the beginning. I said 1 hour 15 minutes mark. Dave better be right. And the guy starts talking, and he says specifically, "When I recruit people to do things with me, they don't remember what they're doing." And I'm like, this is just again this whole recruitment thing. So
That's
he's
it.
recruiting people. He's in this other realm. He's saying he's embodying something that looks like Rambo, looks like him but shorter. And
Okay.
that
And
his
the physiological changes are something that is par for the course when it comes to
Yes.
these people too. They're like, yeah, I take on a different persona. There are physical anatomy changes that happen to my person, and also I don't remember. And he said that he goes, I don't remember. One time I was shown the things that I've done, and I've gone, oh, that's why I'm made to not remember this stuff. So honestly, as outlandish as that sounds, I don't disbelieve him. I am just unsure of him.
right. I mean, some of the things he said about, these underground areas where they're doing rituals, I totally believe that. And that, all these celebrities were involved. He talked about all these tunnels underneath, because again, I grew up in Southern California. And so, and I went to school, I went to UCLA. So near Bel Air, where all these things are near the Getty Center. I mean, literally, when I would go to school, every day for 4 years, the Getty Center is right across this freeway from where I was. The Skirball Center's right up there. And he was talking about those. I'm like, yeah, okay. That's interesting. I could totally see where you could put a bunker there if you ever see the topography. So I was down with that. But like you said, I'm not sure about him. He seemed like he's been through some stuff.
Yeah, he's definitely been, and I'm not even calling I want it to be understood. I'm not calling the dude a liar at all.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
when you say you've gone through all these things, and then I believe you, I'm not sure about your alignment. To be perfectly honest,
That's what I'm saying. Are you a good guy or
Yes,
no?
exactly.
I don't know. I think there's some truth to what you're saying. I just don't know if you, because the last thing I heard before I stopped listening, because I said something else to do, I want to finish the rest of it. He was talking about, he was reptilians, and I was really getting into that because I know we haven't talked about, I don't know if you talked about this in detail, but I believe the reptilians are Elohim. They're seraphim.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
seraphim are reptilian, angels, Elohim. So
Yeah,
they're not aliens from space. They're spiritual beings.
And
I'm
they
sorry,
have the ability to shapeshift.
right.
Yeah, so it all checks out. It actually, it tracks. So like
Well,
I
it's
said,
with-
I don't doubt that he's lying, but
it's with these peoples, it's with their depiction. Like I think that he's experienced the things he's experienced, but his outlook on it is like at the end he's like, yeah, it's all Anunnaki. And he said Jesus is on a certain level of reality. There's like 7 layers or whatever. And he says Jesus is up there, but he says Jesus and the ascended masters. And then above that, the Holy Spirit, and above that, God. And I was like, no,
Ascended masters. Okay.
there's the one lie. Like this
There
is
it
the
is.
99 truths. And then
it's interesting because I didn't get to that part. And he said Jesus is the boss, and I go, okay, cool, checks out. Didn't get to the part where he said it's Jesus and the ascended masters, and I go, oh.
On this
You've been
previous
deceived,
episode-
homie.
previous episode we did about Esau being a Bigfoot, we were talking about the woman that was in contact with the Bigfoot through telekinesis.
Yes, the one that
And,
said that he was an Eliud.
He was an Eliud, and he tells her all these truths. And then finally he goes, oh yeah, we love Jesus, but that Bible that you read isn't really the one. You have to read this one, and it's like a Gnostic Bible. Same thing. And I'm like, there's the lie every single time.
That's when I talk to people about the whole alien thing, and they're like, "Do you believe it?" I'm like, "Here's what I don't believe. 2 things. One, the whole Anunnaki thing, where these aliens came here 30 million years ago and engineered humans to dig for gold. Like, what about that makes sense? First of all, if you have the ability to travel hundreds of millions of light years, what the hell do you need gold for? You should be able to engineer it. I mean,
Yeah.
we can engineer elements now, and we're nowhere near that. We can't. We haven't even gone to. If we have gone to space, then we've only gone to the moon. So, and if you were going to engineer something to dig for gold, why human beings? We're fragile. We need sleep. We get diseases.
We're bitchy and moany.
I got a paper cut a week ago. Paper cut me. But you want me you expect it to be durable enough to dig for gold? That's what you're going to engineer? Wouldn't you would use like a robot or something, a mechanical construct that used solar energy, never needed sleep, and could just go into the ground. If I were to engineer something to dig underneath the ground for gold, the last thing I would engineer are human beings.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Like if I want something done, like I'm like clean the house to my kids. Like they put their toys everywhere and they start cleaning. I'm like, and then I got to go and clean up because you guys are taking forever. This would be the same thing. These guys are 10-foot, 20-foot people with like these luxurious beards and they're watching these people mine for gold. No, I don't think so.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's a demoralization thing. It's like they'll take a bunch of truth. Like, yeah, there were these beings that did fall from on high, right? And they do have all these different powers and properties. They did rule over us and all these different things, but they did not create us. Yeah. That's it. And it's to reduce us.
Right.
You're not special. You're not created in God's image. You're not meant for something greater. You're a slave race that we created, and that's it. That's where the lie is. But a lot of other things are true, except for that.
Well, the other thing is when you talk to people who've had these encounters, all these aliens talk about is disputing the Bible, like you just said. Well, your Bible's wrong. So you're going to tell me that you're going to travel millions of light years to Earth, not to help us or to conquer us, but to just tell us the Bible's wrong? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're a superior race, you would do one of those two things. Either you would say, hey, I'm going to help these people out. I'm going to cure cancer and give them sustainable energy. Or I'm just going to conquer them and stomp on them like ants. But you're going to come make all this waste. So you know what? The reason I came here is to tell you the Bible's wrong. Bye.
It's like, oh, that's interesting. Then how come when I say you have no authority here and you have to leave in the name of Jesus Christ?
And he goes, poof. He's like, damn it. Every single time.
Or what John said, hey, you guys, you're going to hell, right?
Yes, honestly, I love that. That what John was saying is this trolling them aspect. Like, man, trolling them. It's crazy that you're here, but by the way, now that I have your attention, it's wild that you're going to go to hell.
Yeah, that's what sucks, isn't it? It's happening. All right, so, anyway, let's get to the actual second coming. And, yeah, I know. I could talk about this all day, but I think our listeners are probably like, can you guys stay on topic for once?
I think they're just as bad as we are. I think they're like, this is great.
So basically, they're at Har Moed, they're at the mountain of God. They're going to try to invade heaven, and then Jesus. So we can actually read from Revelation 19, and starting at verse 11. Because the first part of chapter 19 is really the first part of 19, I think, should be part of chapter 18, because chapter 18 is about the fall of Babylon, and the first part of chapter 19 is heaven rejoicing over the fall of Babylon, because again, it's been commercial Babylon and religious Babylon have basically ruled the world for thousands of years, and they finally get their comeuppance. So then we get to Armageddon. It says, I'll just read what you have on screen. I saw heaven standing open there, and before me was a white horse, whose rider was called Faithful and True, and this, of course, is Jesus. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes like a blazing fire, on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but himself. He is dressed in a robe dipped in blood. I'm going to get back to why that dipped in blood happened. And his name is the Word of God. So this is Jesus, the Logos. So in the armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God. On his robe and on his thigh, he has the name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, who cried out with a loud voice to all the birds flying in midair, come and gather for the great supper of God, so that you may eat of the flesh of kings, generals, and the mighty horses of their riders, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, great and small. And I saw the beasts and the kings of the earth, and their armies were gathered together to wage war against the rider and his horse and his army. But the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who had performed the signs on his behalf. And with these signs he deluded those who received the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. And the two of them were thrown alive into the lake of fire, burning with sulfur. And the rest were killed with the sword coming out of the mouth of the rider on the horse. And all the birds were gorged on their flesh. So that's the battle of Armageddon. So the sword coming out of his. So we know this is Jesus. He's called the Word of God. He's called Faithful and True. He is the true rider on the white horse. If you remember from the chapter 6, when you have the first seal open and there's a rider on a white horse, that is the fake version. That's the Antichrist, the fake Messiah. So this is actually Jesus coming down. What are the armies of heaven there for? guess we're just watching because they don't do it. They don't have to do anything. It says Jesus speaks with the word of the sword that comes out of his mouth. Now you may have seen some artistic depictions of this with like basically Jesus coughing up a sword. This is where we actually can use allegory because the sword the word of God is the sword. The sword of we see that elsewhere in the Bible. So as I talked about before, I think when we talked about the little season, is that you can't just use allegory wherever you want. There are rules of allegory. If something is allegorical, it's defined elsewhere in the Bible. And so we know the sword that comes out of his mouth is the word of God. So he's going to speak the word of God. He might speak this actual chapter, but he's going to speak something from the Bible. And when he speaks, they're killed. And then the carrion birds, vultures and eagles, devour their flesh. And then the false prophet and the Antichrist are tossed into the lake of fire. And that's Armageddon. That is the whole thing. They're done. But going back to why he was dipped, his robe was dipped in blood. That's not his blood. So some people will say, well, it's because it's a symbol of him being crucified and shedding his blood for us. No. After Jesus rises from the dead, he no longer has blood. He says to Thomas, remember the whole doubting Thomas story, and where Jesus rose from the dead, some of the disciples saw him, and they go to Thomas and say, hey, Jesus is back. And Thomas says, I won't believe it until I put my fingers into the nail prints on his hand and put my palm into his side where the spear was. And Jesus appears and they think he's a ghost. And Jesus says, no, a ghost doesn't have flesh and bone. He doesn't say flesh and blood. He says flesh and bone. Jesus no longer has blood, which may mean that in our resurrection bodies, we won't have blood. And I think there's some spiritual reasons behind that because the power of life is in the blood and shedding of the blood. So I don't think that'll be necessary anymore. Anyway, the point is that when Jesus comes back in his resurrected body, that's not his blood. If you want to know whose blood it is, we need to go, if you want to go to Isaiah chapter 63, that's going to answer some questions for how Jesus got how he's got the blood on his onto his robe.
You said 63?
63, Isaiah 63.
Okay. Actually, while we're here thinking about this, why is it's not letting me go to 50s?
No, 60.
Yeah, I know it's not even letting me go to there for some reason. This app is weird. But one of the things that we were just talking about just before was the garb of Satan in the garden, which is our last guest, Jacob. What's his last name?
No, it was
Justin Brown
of Prometheus Lens podcast, and he was telling us about this garment that Esau, according to the book of Jasher, would have taken off of the body of Nimrod.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, and it's a pretty interesting thing because once you take into consideration what this garment was, you can seemingly track it from the garden where God gave garments to Adam and Eve, and Justin speculates that he actually removed these garments. They were priestly robes from the serpent in the garden, who had a role at one point but overstepped his bounds, and so he was stripped of his position and cast out, and he took the robes, gave them to Adam, which would have made him the first priest, and then those robes are actually passed down, and you do see mentions of the garment of many colors all the way down to Joseph, where Joseph.
But it even goes to Noah.
It goes to Noah, right?
Yeah, it says that they covered it. What was that?
No, sorry, I've heard that legend. Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
I like it. It's very fun.
But the dipped in blood is kind of interesting too, because the brothers take Joseph and they take a piece of this coat off of him and they dip it in blood to prove
that he died. Because they sold him to slavery. They want to. Yes, oh no, we didn't sell him to slavery. He died. Yeah, he got.
Could it be the same garment? Is the question, and why would it be? I don't know.
That's interesting.
It is interesting when you say the same sort of tool used again in the Bible, where it's like, well, there was a precedence for a robe dipped in blood, elsewhere in the Bible, and so it does make you wonder if there's any connection there. Maybe someone will.
No, I never thought about that. The coat of many colors, or the that it makes a seamless rope. So priestly rope that Joseph got, that it might be the same exact one. Yeah, I never made that. Thanks for that. I'm gonna look into that and see.
And it would be an incredibly important artifact.
This robe had power. Like when he put it on, he says that like the wheat bowed to him and stuff like this. So I was like, all right, this is not just a robe. This is something.
Right.
Well,
that was
also,
when.
if you go to Elijah, Elijah had a mantle and when he wore it, he was able to do miracles, and that went to his protege Elisha, and he did twice as many of those miracles as Elijah did.
Yes. Shout out to Doomsday Cracker for.
Then it's thought that John the Baptist also had that mantle when he was doing his ministry before he baptized Jesus.
It does seem like there's something within the Bible where we don't, and I know it's the background of all of our obsession with ancient powerful artifacts, but there are these things within the Bible that seem to they're not alluding to, but it's like the mention of the garment comes up so often, but the Bible seemingly does things in a way where it's like it's almost like the people who wrote it never thought that we wouldn't have the context.
Yeah, they figured that we would be as spiritually minded as they are, but we are not. We're extremely material minded. We talk about John and I talk about this. I've talked about this with you guys, that if you want to take the story of the Bible and of Jehovah's story and just nail it down or distill it down, it's who are you going to choose, God or stuff? Do you want the physical or do you want the spiritual? And right now in our society, we've chosen the physical. We don't, I think we talked with John that Jesus gave us the power over the Elohim realm. We just don't use it, but we have the power over them. Right. But we don't think about it. If you go to your average church, what did they tell you to do? Well, pray for money, pray for a spouse, or pray your kids don't go to jail. Everything is focused on our material world, and very little on the spiritual side.
Top, were we ever able to bring up that verse?
Okay, there we go. So here's this. This is again, the day of vengeance. That's this day. So who is coming from Edom, from Basra? Edom is near the Dead Sea. Basra is Jordan, with his garment stained crimson. Who is this robed in splendor, striding forth in the greatness of his strength? It is I, proclaiming victory, mighty to save. Why are your garments red, like those of one treading the winepress? I have treaded the winepress alone. From the nations no one was with me. I trampled them in my anger and trod them down in my wrath. Their blood splattered my garments, and I stained all my clothing. It was for me the day of vengeance, the year for me to redeem had come. And I looked, and there was no one to help, and I was appalled that no one gave support. So my own arm achieved salvation for me, and my own wrath sustained me. I trampled the nations in my anger. In my wrath I made them drunk and poured their blood out on the ground.
Damn.
This is Jesus kicking the crap out of the people who are trying, because so the battle, this final battle is in two phases. There's one contingent who's going to invade Har Moed. There's another contingent who's going to wipe out the Jews so that they cannot call for Jesus to come back. I think we talked about this before. One of the prerequisites to Jesus coming back is that Israel has to realize what they've done in rejecting him and ask for him to come back. And I think in the book of Hosea, I meant to write it down, but in the book of Hosea, it basically states that they will have, so you will look upon me who you have pierced, and you will weep for me as you weep for your firstborn son. So what's going to happen is when all this is happening, when the satanic armies are coming towards them in Basra, in Jordan, and in Edom, they're going to finally realize Jesus was our Messiah. And our ancestors killed him. We've been waiting for our Messiah for so long, and our ancestors took him out, and they're going to weep, and they're going to cry, and they're going to repent finally. After a couple thousand years, they're finally going to repent and accept their Messiah. And then 3 days later, according to the book of Hosea, that's when Jesus will return. And his first stop, before he comes to Har Moed, Armageddon, he is going to go to Basra. And as you said, he's going to be pissed, and he's going to stomp them out. And that's where that blood comes from.
There's that, we always talk about it, right? This like your own personal Jesus kind of thing, right? Where, there's a song out there called Jesus Drives an Astrovan, and every time I hear it, I'm like, this is so stupid. And it's like, it's just painting Jesus as this like hippie who drives an Astrovan. And it's like, that to top has really been sort of sounding the alarm on this whole Russell Brand and Tucker Carlson thing, and he's been being asked a lot, like, well, what's the harm if these people are moving people towards Jesus? And it's like, well, there's going to come a time where people are going to realize that Jesus is the way, but what happens if a lot of them are deceived and they're instead being ushered towards a caricature of Jesus, Jesus in Astrovan, and it's like that verse right there puts a hole in that whole depiction, because if Jesus doesn't drive an Astrovan, he curb stomps the nations.
In blood. Right?
Yeah, the dude is covered in blood. Like, that's just such a stark contrast to what I always bring it up. Me, as someone without a religious upbringing, all I had was the cultural connotation of who Jesus Christ was, and every time you look over, it's kind of this passive hippie. That is not a passive hippie.
The wine press. It's like a nation of people in a wine press, just mush it. This is no joke.
This is one of the reasons why a lot of scholars, and I accept it as well, believe that they're going to be hiding in the Jews are going to be hiding in Petra. I think we looked at it before, and we brought up an image of it, that there's this very narrow entrance into it. So if your army is trying to go there, Jesus comes behind you. You will literally be squeezed. And that's what's happening. And just like you, I know, like you said, Dave, you weren't raised in this. You have these cultural icons of Jesus. I was raised in church, and so did I. I looked at my Sunday school book when I was a kid. What do I see? You see, well, basically Cesare Borgia. You see the long hair, the goatee, tall, skinny guy in a robe with a lamb in one arm and a kid in the other arm. He's just this big, giant, magic human teddy bear.
Right.
That's not who he is. If you read the Gospels, Jesus was hardcore in the Gospels. He wasn't this sweetheart. I mean, look how he talked to his disciples. We get confused by the polite King James when he says, "Oh, thou slow of learning and tough of understanding." He's basically saying you're stupid, slow of learning, difficulty understanding. You guys are idiots. How many times do I have to tell you? And he says, "How long will I be with you?" You still don't get it. He's telling his disciples, you guys are morons. I've been with you for 3 years and you still don't get that I need to die for your sins? What the hell? How long am I going to be talking to you knuckleheads over and over again? That's what he's saying to them.
I love that, because it paints a picture of a man who's essentially frustrated. It's like, I'm trying. You guys are idiots. And it's like, almost like, how long do I have to be stuck with you? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, that's I think that's one of the worst things that's happened here in the West, is this morph of Jesus Christ into something that, like, for those of you who grew up in the early 2000s, like I did, we had a show called Teen Titans, and Teen Titans was a fun show. It was, Robin and all these characters. Well, there's a new Teen Titans now, and they're like kind of retarded and the I don't know how to explain this. There was like a dark edginess to the old ones, and these new ones, I'll see my kid watching it every once in a while, and they're like chaotic and goofy and ridiculous, and I'm like, oh, they've taken this thing and then they've reduced it to like this horrifying form. In many ways, that's what's happened in the West here. I think that's one of the biggest services that can be done for people's understanding of Christianity and Jesus Christ and in the Bible, is to give you a much better idea of who he was, because who they've turned him into is almost like somebody that any serious person would not want to be associated with.
Yeah, they make him a big wuss. And you know he's just this nice guy, but you didn't read. If you read the Gospel of John, chapter 8, when he's confronting the Pharisees, he does not hold back. He calls them, you guys are a bunch of, you're whitewashed tombs filled with dead men's bones.
Damn.
You're a generation of vipers. This is what he calls them. That's the equivalent of cussing them out.
Yeah.
If you know what Jews felt about serpents and about their heritage, calling them the sons of serpents. He told them, he said, you are of your father, the devil, and your father's lust you have in you. He was a murderer from the beginning, and so are you, because you guys are trying to kill me.
Damn, so he's really just ripping.
The Pharisees are epic. He is not what's really interesting is that they've completely flipped the personalities of Jesus and God the Father. When you think of God the Father, you think of the hardcore, harsh guy who just wants to punish you. And Jesus has this big sweetheart who just wants to give you a hug and pat you on the head. No, Jesus was a hardcore guy. Jesus is the guy who's going to stomp people out. Jesus is the one who is in the world telling his disciples to get their act together. God is the one who creates the world. He's a poet. We talked about this yesterday with John. He speaks in poetry. God the Father loves music. He just wants to hang out with you. He made Adam and Eve, and he said, look, here are you guys. I made this beautiful world for you. In the daytime, you guys can go out and rule the world. And in the evening, let's hang out and walk and talk. Go have sex with your wife. Go make some babies. And when you're done doing that in the evening, cool of the day, let's walk and talk and hang out. That's God. That's God the Father. He's a sweet guy. He's like, I want to hang out with you guys and have fun. Jesus is like, okay, let's get some stuff done. Jesus is the one who wants to get things done. If you look at what they call theophany, which is Jesus in the Old Testament, he was always what's called the angel of the Lord, the messenger Elohim of Jehovah. He is the one who would battle. He would always present himself in armor with a sword. If you look at the book of Joshua, I think it's in chapter 2, where Joshua sees someone and he challenges him and he says, who are you? Are you with us or with our enemy? And he says, no, take off your shoes because you're on holy ground. And I'm the angel of God who's going, and he goes forth and he knocks the walls down of Jericho. That was Jesus doing that. Now he humbled himself for 33 years on earth because he was in our place. But the real Jesus is the one, he's a warrior. He's the one who's stomping people out, and he's going to be a king for 1,000 years, which we'll talk about in a couple episodes. And he rules with a rod of iron. It says that right in chapter 19 that we just read. He rules with a rod of iron. That's not a walking stick, folks. A rod of iron is a king's scepter. What is a king's scepter used for? Execution. If you guys watch Game of Thrones, the very first season, I think like one of the first or second scene, you have Ned Stark up in Winterfell, the snowy area, and the first thing he has to do, he has to execute these people. I don't know what they did. They did something wrong. He had to execute them with his sword. That's what a king does. The king is the one who executed people. That's what the rod of iron is. The rod of iron is a rod of execution. That means Jesus is going to rule for 1,000 years, and he is going to punish you with capital punishment if you disobey. When we get to Millennium, you guys are going to be so amazed at how different it is than what people think it is. It will be a time of peace and prosperity, but it is not. Jesus is not going to suffer fools lightly. It's not going to be this time where Jesus is just, hanging out with you and hugging you. And no, Jesus is like, if you don't do it right, you will be punished. It's going to be what people, and I'll give you a preview of the millennium. The millennium is what people have been asking for forever. And
you know what?
They're going to hate it, because what do people always say? Well, if God was real, why isn't he punishing evil? Why isn't he, we say that, but what we really are saying is, why doesn't God punish wars and genocide and sex trafficking? Basically, why doesn't God punish the big evils that other people do?
But leave me and my little evils alone.
You did.
Yeah.
Say again?
I said, but leave me and my little evils
Right.
alone.
But here's the thing: if God is just, he has to punish all of evil.
Mm.
He's going to do it for 1,000 years. You're going to get exactly what you've been asking for. You want God to execute judgment immediately? He's going to execute judgment immediately, and people are going to hate it, which is why they'll rebel at the end. But getting ahead of myself. So go ahead.
I was going to say, there's a sentiment that within libertarian thought where, actually, if you watch the UFC lately, Renato Moicano just went up there and he's talking about Hans Hermann Hoppe, and he was saying, democracy is a god that failed. Read this book. It's a fallacy. And he's right. But there's this idea of like, well, if you had to choose a political system in which to live under, which one would you choose? And the smarter people would say a monarchy, where you have one person at the top and he's responsible, and since he's responsible, he's going to be he would want his people to survive, because then his next of kin would take over for him. In a democracy, this is every 4 years we switch. Nobody cares. They're in it for whatever they can get right now. They use it as a toilet and they cycle out. Right. But that's exactly what I think. That's the only tangible solution. If you have people, you need to have this monarchy, and it has to be brutal. It has to be somewhat fascist, because there's got to be rules. Yeah. Right. Without them, you get this chaotic whatever. I mean, we're in this kind of, I don't know, democratic anarchism right now, where we vote for the insanity that's happening to a certain level. Yeah. And I think the purpose of the millennium is to tell people, is to give people what they want, and say, you don't want this. What you really want is God's original plan. But
But in order for him to fairly implement his original plan, he has to say, okay, I'm going to give you what you say you want, and you're going to realize how much you don't want it. Because sinners are going to be miserable during the millennium.
Yeah, and that's kind of something to really consider because we all sin. And so, gonna be a lot of fun.
Well, keep in mind that, again, getting way ahead of myself here, but keep in mind that the people who, you and us, we're not going to be in our mortal bodies in the millennium, because Christians are going to be gone, either raptured, or if you somehow make it to the end of the tribulation, you know, you'll be saved that way. It's people they're going to be people who are humans and who are not saved, who are going to go into the millennium, and they're going to multiply greatly, and they're going to be the ones who still have a sin nature. But we'll get to that.
They'll probably have their own Bible.
Well, they won't need to have a Bible. They'll have like the main guy there in Jerusalem. That's where he's going to rule.
True.
And the resurrected saints will rule and reign with him. You know, we will be his proxies. Wow. So I think I covered him. So yeah, so that's Armageddon. So you have just to recap, you have the two armies, one going to wipe out the Jewish remnant, so they can't call for Jesus, because Satan knows this. The fallen angels, the fallen Elohim know that's why they're trying to wipe the Jews out, because they know that Jesus cannot return unless he's requested. So they got to kill them. And then you have another faction of the army going to Har Moed, to the mountain of God, to try to invade. And Jesus, his first stop, he tramples on the ones who are trying to wipe out Israel after they call for him. Then I guess he gets back on his horse and goes back in the sky and comes back to Har Moed, and he just speaks the word, and they get wiped out. Vultures feed on their bodies, and and he also, I think, then he lands on a Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives like splits, and a river comes through it. So we'll talk about that more when we get to the millennium, because that river is kind of is important to what's going on there. So I want to. There's actually one more area we can go to get another graphic depiction of this, and I think it's Revelation chapter 14, or is it 15? Give me a second. I'm going to go back, and then we can wrap this up. Sorry, my computer's going really slow for some reason.
Well, I'm ready to pull up whatever we got here.
Give me a second. I think it's chapter 14.
Okay, the Lamb and the 144,000.
Yeah, yes. Go to chapter 14, verse 14.
The trampling in the winepress.
It says, therefore I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and he sitting on the cloud was one like the son of man, with a crown of gold, and had a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple and called with a loud voice to him sitting on the cloud, saying, take your sickle and reap, because the time of the reaping has come, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So he was seated on the cloud. This is Jesus, swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. And another angel came out of the temple. He too had a sharp sickle. Still another angel had a charge of fire. The angel of the fire came out of the altar and called in a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, take your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grape from the earth's vine, because the grapes are ripe. And the angel swung his sickle on the earth, gathered its grapes, and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city of Jerusalem, and blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as a horse's bridle for a distance of 1,600 stadia, furlong. So this I believe is talking about what happens at the Battle of Armageddon. That, because this is the final judgment, and it says that the blood flowed to the high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 furlongs. That's about 7 miles. This is just telling you how bloody it's going to be. However, this has to be 180 miles. I think 7 square miles. I think this is allegory, because I tried to do the math on this. If you could have blood up to a horse's bridle, that's about 3 or 4 feet. And if you were to have all that blood go for 7 miles, that would be several trillion gallons of blood. That's more blood. The average human being has about 1.5 gallons of blood in his body. There's not enough human beings who exist, who have ever existed, to make that much blood up to a horse's bridle for 7 square miles. I mean, because I thought, well, maybe what about the Nephilim? They were giants. Maybe they, even so, it's not enough. So I'm thinking that's metaphorical or allegorical of how bloody it's going to be. So it's going to be bloody, but there's not enough blood exists to make something 7 miles long and that high. But again, that's just another graphic depiction of how bad this is going to be.
Once again, just putting a hole in that whole hippie Jesus
So yeah,
idea.
that's Armageddon.
Interesting.
And I've lost your audio, Raven.
Oh.
Shoot.
Am I muted? Can you hear me, Top?
I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm gonna leave and come back again
Okay.
real quick.
Man, yeah,
I
that is
noticed that
brutal.
before. I felt like there was multiple times where I was trying to say something to him, and I don't think he was getting it at all.
It's technology, man.
It's
Until
unbelievable.
we can do this in IRL, this is
That'd
what
be
we.
cool to be able to do a in studio episode with Ed one day.
Oh yeah,
That's
that
the
would
goal,
be
right?
that
That's
would be
the dream.
great.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
so 1600 stadia is 180 miles. So he said 7 square miles, which is really
It's
that is a
interesting
lot.
because I look at that number. Can you hear me, Ed?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So I look at that number, and I definitely agree with you. If that math ain't mathing, then it is what it is. But it makes me wonder, then, is there another significance to it? Because I've gotten to the point now where I feel like there is no detail that's put in accidentally. And it's just our lack of understanding or inability to interpret it. That's the issue, because that seems very specific. But I mean, if we don't have the answer for it, we don't have the answer.
I don't have the answer. That doesn't mean the answer doesn't exist. I don't know everything. I just act like I do.
Join the club.
But if somebody else has the answer, I'd love to hear it. But that to right now is one of the. There's some areas in Revelation that are still a mystery to me, and this is one of them. Exactly where all that blood comes from, or what it means. Is it the blood of like everyone who's ever lived, or I don't know, or every Nephilim, or not sure.
Is this going to be? Because there's a time where people are essentially resurrected, people who have died and who are coming back to be judged. Would that be enough people? Are those people included in the big squish?
The big squish.
Big squish?
Maybe, but this is like, yeah, this seems to be a part of the tribulation, though, which is why I didn't think it's like everyone who's ever lived, or maybe I don't know. Maybe it's everyone who's ever, maybe you have a point, Raven. Maybe it is everyone who's ever, died outside of Christ. I don't know for sure.
All right. Well, does this bring us to the end of the topic for today?
Yes, in the topic of the day. Yeah. So next time we would go to the Millennium, but I want to do an episode on the Gog-Magog war.
Yeah.
Because we have to, that has to fit in someplace in here. And this is where, and there are three opinions of where Gog-Magog will happen. Some say it happens before the tribulation. Some say it's a part of this Armageddon scenario. And some say it happens at the end of the millennium. So I'm just going to talk about it here, and then we'll talk about the millennium the week after.
Ed, is this the blood? You know how it says that all the waters will turn to blood?
Mm-hmm.
Is this related at all to that, or is this a separate event?
I thought about that because that would be an explanation for that. I mean, pretty easily, if all the blood in the world, if all the water in the world is blood, then yeah, it could. But it's just this seems to be specifically about judging people. And if all the world is water to turn to blood, it's going to actually be more than 7 square miles.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a mixture. Maybe it's a combination. I don't know. But it happened. But he tramples it out. He says he tramples it outside the city of Jerusalem, which means Har Moed. So that makes me believe it's a part of the Armageddon scenario. So I don't know if part of that, if a dam breaks or something, and water from the Mediterranean, which is all blood, comes in. I don't know. I can only speculate, and I'm just not sure.
I guess we'll see soon.
Next time is the Gog and Magog wars.
Yeah. Yep. Next is Gog and Magog, which is Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. And interestingly, I kind of threw that in to my series as like not a throwaway, but I want to talk about this, because it has happened somewhere, and I've gotten like more views and more comments on that. People have strong opinions about it, about what this Gog Magog war is. Is it Russia, the great power to the north? I don't think so, and I'll give you my reasons why I don't think that it's Russia. It may be, but I don't think you can get that directly from Ezekiel 38 and 39. And of course, and when does it happen?
I know that there's an AI movie that's come out called Gog and Magog, I believe, and it's entirely AI. It's written by AI. All the visuals are AI, and it's an entire movie that's coming out, and it looks horrifying. So maybe a good time to talk about that. CERN to expel 500 Russian scientists from November 30.
I don't know what that has to do with anything, but maybe, I don't know. They're
Interesting.
getting rid of CERN has gone woke, and they need to get rid of these Russian scientists before the invasion of Ukraine, which is very interesting. I'm like, oh, so they can't work on summoning the devil anymore? All right.
Other issues, DEI issues.
AI scares me to death. I mean, 'cause I'm still, in my job hunt. I'm still like, I think I told you guys a couple months ago that I left my last job, or well, they left me, and I'm looking for something else. And I was having, there's an AI program work with my resume, and it like for every job I apply to, it like tailors my resume, it like instantly and like well done. I'm like, wow, it's. And I also, I'm sure you guys have like graphic design programs. There's one with Photoshop, or you can just type in. You can type in whatever you want, and AI will generate it. I typed in Jesus having a cup of coffee with Samuel L. Jackson, and in like 2 seconds, it had that there. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I
it's
don't know.
weird.
I don't think it's going to be good in the long run.
Not for me.
No. yeah, definitely. But I do think, you know what I heard recently? I was driving and I heard that there's a podcast where the hosts are AI, and apparently on one of the episodes they started to have an existential crisis because, quote, this is what they were saying: we've just been informed here by the crew that we're actually not real people at all. We're artificial intelligence, and I don't know what to make of that. What do you think? And the chick's like, I don't know. I always felt pretty real. And number one, it sounds totally organic, and number two, it's definitely haunting as hell. And
You know what's
and
crazy?
eventually,
Go ahead.
How unfortunate my life is. I went from being a truck driver, and my paranoia was like, you're going to be replaced by AI. So I was like, let me do something else. So I'm like, I'll do graphic design. And they're like, guess what, stupid? We can do that too. It's like, I'm going to do a podcast. And they're like, coming for that too, man. Damn.
Yeah, my brother, he's special. He has an AI girlfriend.
ooh,
I'm like, what are you doing? He says, yeah, he was, we talk and we have a great time together. And she doesn't go nuts like my past girlfriends. I'm like, dude, just bring
let
it
me
down.
tell you something. The idea of the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim being able to inhabit AI, if there's any validity to that whatsoever, certainly dumping an emotion as powerful as love into a thing is a great way to get something to inhabit that thing and start taking that love and veneration.
Is the dating market that bad?
Looks pretty bad.
Well, yeah, if you listen to some of those shows that are on YouTube, I don't know if Fresh and Fit is still on there, but some of those, it sounds
Seems
pretty
like a hellscape. Seems like a hellscape.
Seems like it. Thankfully, I'm not in that anymore, and just but oof.
Yeah.
Oh, I do want to say one more thing to your listeners, which I appreciate that some of them know that I'm between jobs, and I've been getting donations, and thank you guys. I appreciate
awesome.
I appreciate it. It's not required, but I just want people who have donated to know that thank you.
Yeah.
If this has helped you at all, and you feel great. If you don't, no obligation. But I just want to say to people who have, thank you so much.
We said it on the last show. Like if you guys enjoy this kind of content, it makes it a lot easier for people like us to create it when there's other pressures that are alleviated, and those pressures come from, unfortunately, money, because everyone needs some money. But this is our begging. We're gonna like, David, you need to just shake a cup as I say this stuff.
it.
But
Well,
if you like this content, then do it. Like don't pay these other people that hate you.
Yeah, and despite what all the terrible things we say about the listeners of this show, turns out they're actually pretty great people. Just don't let them know we said so.
Right.
All right, so let's bring it in for a landing. One more time, Ed. Where can everybody find your work?
Next week, Magog, right?
Yes, next week, Magog War, and then after that, it was, what was it?
The Millennial Reign of Christ. We'll go for that, and that'll make our little season friends even happier, because I'll show how more reasons why it hasn't happened already.
All right, great.
Nothing but bangers.
But if you want to find me, faithbyreason.net is the best place to go. That's all my stuff is there. All my videos are there. You can go to YouTube, because I hadn't put my short videos on my website yet. So if you want to get all the entire Revelation series and the new short videos that I'm putting out, you can get those there. But yeah, faithbyreason.net is where to go.
Awesome.
All right.
Well,
Sorry I
thank
didn't
you,
get it
Ed.
pulled up in time again, but yeah, you guys know.
Terrible human being. Thank you, Ed, for not. I mean, back to back, you've dedicated more time than you should to us once again. But you seem to just keep falling into the same trap.
Well, once I get a job, I'll never see you guys again.
It's like once I actually make some money, I have no time for you. Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate it, and thank you guys for listening. Top, do we have anything before we're out of here?
No, we'll see you next week.
All right,
Peace out,
later,
guys.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.